All right. Well, welcome. We're going to be talking about accessible communications, good business, and ethical practice today. I'm going to go to the next slide. And Laine, you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Laine Amoureux, and I wear a whole lot of hats. Today, you get to see me as a lead technologist with Booz Allen Hamilton and the founder of Amoureux AT Consulting, a local small business supporting other small businesses, nonprofits within the Pacific Northwest with digital accessibility, disability awareness, and diversity, equity, inclusion as it relates to people with disabilities. I am a certified professional in web accessibility. I was one of the first 300 people certified internationally in web accessibility and have over 15 years of experience with people with disabilities, digital accessibility, accessible communication, which is where I got started with my undergrad in public comms.
And my name is Carolyn Quintero. Here on the slide, there's a picture of me with my husband and my two little boys, Oscar and Theo. They definitely keep me busy, but when I am not taking care of them, I am working in the world of accessibility. So I consider myself an accessibility professional, even though I came at it kind of from a slightly different perspective than Laine. I've worked in higher ed. My whole entire professional life has been higher ed, going on 15 years now. So it's the field I love. I love the mission of higher education, and I love helping to train and work with students that are going to go out into the field. I don't come at accessibility from a technology background. Mine is definitely communications humanities. I have a degree in English, communications, and then I have a master's in technical communication. So the areas of accessibility that really interest me are kind of everything digital accessibility as it relates to people. So how are we communicating accessibly in documents? In using those good technical communication skills to make sure that information is clear and easy to navigate and actionable. So that's what I really focus on when I do my trainings with accessibility, is how do we make this message easy to understand and do things with. As my role as the web accessibility analyst at Boise State University, I am responsible for reviewing, remediating, and maintaining the nearly 30,000 pages that we have on our public-facing website, and everything that goes with it: documents, images, media, links, forms, all of it. So that keeps me busy, and I'm probably the one person at Boise State who has looked at every single web page that we have published, and I absolutely love my job because I like to think of how do we make things accessible? Well, let's approach it like a puzzle and break it down and make it logical and kind of approach it that way. So absolutely love my role, and that's what introduced me to Laine, and we collaborate now on some of this stuff. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? So we want to talk about what we mean when we say accessible communications, and why accessible communication is not only a good thing to do, but it's a smart business strategy. We'll talk a little bit about the moral and legal implications, and then also some practical tips to get started. So those things that you can take away from today and start implementing right away. And then we'll have time at the end for questions, and we've got a very small list of resources to share with you. So Laine, you want to do the next one?
I feel like that was a little sarcastic, a small list of resources.
Meaning we had to really pare it down because there are so many available.
So jumping into what is accessible communication, right? That should feel pretty straightforward to most people. We are just making sure that everyone can easily understand and make decisions about the information, the communication products that we are putting out, no matter how they access those. And we don't always know what users of our content are, how they're getting there, right? We can find some metrics that say, X number of people use mobile devices, so many people use Windows computers, but you don't know what types of ways that they interact with those devices on their side. And I don't have the white cane or the guide dog up here right now, so it's not obvious, even in the same room necessarily, that someone might be engaging with information and content a little bit more differently than the majority of people.
So, in a nutshell, making your communication accessible isn't just about doing the right thing. It's also about reaping the rewards that come with it. Because you don't know if someone is using an assistive technology on their phone, using TalkBack, using VoiceOver, you just know they're using their phone. How can you make sure that you're communicating in a way that they're going to be able to interact with you in your business? So what are those rewards? So Laine, do you want me to do these ones?
Oh, if I didn't have so many Google shapes on this slide all of a sudden.
I know, I thought I took care of them all.
Talking about accessible communication and my screen reader can't get past all the Google shapes. All right. So a lot of those business rewards, they're going to be things that are going to really impact your brand. It's going to help you stand out in the crowd. More people are going to be able to find and use your content. If something is sitting across the room, it's out of sight, out of mind for me, unless it's right in front of me. Same kind of thing. If I run across an inaccessible picture that is a flyer for your event out there on social media, it's out of sight, out of mind. It's a PNG. I'm done. I don't know what PNG is. I know it's a file type. That's it. So you reach a broader audience. You get to make your customers happier. Who doesn't want to do that? You'll be able to enhance their experiences, and at the same time, you're building brand loyalty. I can't tell you, she brought up the Google phones, forget it. Nope, give me an Apple phone. Apple has gone out of their way to make products accessible. They have my loyalty when it comes to mobile. Obviously, not so much with PC, my HP up here. But then there's also legal implications, and what business doesn't want to stay out of trouble with the law, right? So you can stay out of trouble legally, but also improve overall that brand reputation as well for being ethical, responsible, all the things.
Yeah, so that transitions great into this next point, that it's the right thing to do. Accessible communication improves the inclusivity and equality at your business or your organization. It helps respect human dignity and promote non-discrimination. And it's also a professional responsibility. If you're sending out information about benefits and human resource services, it needs to be sent out in a way that is accessible by anyone, no matter how they want to access that. So that is a professional responsibility. And then kind of the bottom point, legal compliance. I like to list it last because really the previous points are all about the human aspects of it. And then the legal compliance is just kind of there as like the last stopgap.
But isn't it ethical to follow legal guidelines?
It absolutely is.
It's part of that ethical responsibility, right? And goes back to enhancing that brand reputation for sure. So.
Absolutely. So a lot of us understand that this is important. We need to do this. We don't want to exclude anyone intentionally or unintentionally, but it can feel very overwhelming. Like, how on earth do we pull this off? And Laine and I have these conversations all the time with people, and we tell them just to really have kind of a narrow focus at first. If you're feeling overwhelmed, focus on your role in creating and delivering a communication. So you may not have control over the entire process, but you'll have control over the parts that you play into it. So that's kind of how we broke up this presentation. So Laine, do you want to?
Even that's a little overwhelming.
I know.
But you do have to realize, like, the digital accessibility is going to touch every step in the digital communication product creation process, starting with planning all the way through publication, right? No one person can master every single step along the way. Whether we're talking about digital accessibility, visual or graphic design, there's no way that one person can take and do all of that really, really well. So digital accessibility is along those lines. So always grab onto the thing that makes the most sense to you and start there. And usually in that comms production process, copy is often the first step. You outline a draft. You don't just throw together a infographic or a bar chart without some sort of text data to refer to. So copywriting is always where we tend to start. Text is the great equalizer. Your copy is going to be one thing that is going to be the most accessible. If someone can't see it, there's software that turns it to speech for them so they can hear it. If they can't hear your video, closed captioning, that's text that makes it so that people can see those words and read those words and access those. So text is always that great equalizer. So focus, if you're a copywriter, focus in on clear and concise language, following basic writing for the web principles, plain language principles. Structure that content. Go back to 7th grade English class and go all the way back through outlining and topics and main topics, and structure that with topic headings. If you're including images within the larger product, the copywriter should also be involved in writing alternative text for those images so that they can adequately convey the purpose of that image and what value it adds to the copy, and that becomes a seamless experience for the readers who can't see the visuals, whether that's because their internet's slow, they're on their hotspot and don't want to waste all their data downloading, or they are blind and can't see it. When possible, avoid complex jargon and terminology. If there's fields where you just can't do that, but that's knowing your audience, right? Especially in the academic space, know your audience. If you have to use complex jargon and terminology in that space, you have to. But just generally, most of us are not. My brain is fried. My 4-year-old was way too early this morning, so definitely don't have examples off the top of my head today.
A good example I can give for that is acronyms. Higher education loves acronym. Education sphere loves acronyms. I still cannot read that acronym unless it has a definition. So if you're going to use the acronym, a good practice is to explain the term, and then you can use it. So that's just a good technical communication term. If you can't avoid that complex jargon and terminology, definitions. Put that definition in early to explain it, and then people have that frame of reference if they don't automatically recall it off the top of their head. And that's good for anyone, because even someone who understands that jargon, maybe they've got a sinus infection that day and their brain just isn't running as fast as they could. It helps everyone kind of having those definitions and setting that foundation so everyone's on the same page. Does that help?
Yep.
We got it.
And then this last point, writing descriptive link or clear link text. Has anybody ever tried to click here on their mobile phone? The words click here? It's a small target to try to click. But if you're using assistive technologies, what's click here do? I don't have the context of the paragraph around it. So finding ways as the copywriter, getting creative in how you state that a link is present. Not just using click here alone, but or learn more. That's my current complaint is learn more. Learn more what? So definitely working on that as the copywriter, and how you can state that there is a link to something without explicitly saying click here or learn more. Those calls to action are important, as all copywriters know, but you got to expand on that a little bit.
All right. So while text is the great equalizer, it is not the only thing that we communicate with. Visuals can be very important to helping understand how things are related on the page. They can help break down complex ideas, flow charts, diagrams, things like that. They can really enhance the text, but the main thing to remember is they should not ever replace the text. So one of the most important things when creating visuals is to use contrasting colors. Trying to think of a really good example off the top of my head. Well, I work at Boise State. Blue and orange, our blue and orange do not work well together. They are very difficult colors to have contrast in a readable way. So we have rules in place that say, hey, this is how you can use your blues, this is how you can use your oranges, but for the web, they should not meet. So that's one way that we can make sure that anyone who has any kind of color blindness, or if two colors that are too similar causes like headaches if you're looking at it, we want to make sure to avoid some of those issues. So we use good contrasting colors. We also don't use color alone to convey meaning. The red fields are required. Which ones are red? Turn off the color on your monitor and just have grayscale and try to figure out which one's red. It looks exactly the same. So you want to have some other kind of descriptor required, asterisk, something that uses another way than just color. Bold. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Symbols, patterns. If you're dealing with bar charts, for example, and your bars are all different colors, apply a pattern to that color as well to help it stand out even further and define that. But we're talking about multiple means of expression. If anybody's familiar with universal design and learning principles, multiple means of expressing and communicating your message. So that's why the images are important, and they enhance that text. Text alone is overwhelming for some people, and those images are huge. Nobody wants to spend 10 minutes reading an article when they could see the data they want in a picture. So it's about meeting everybody and expressing those data points in as many ways as possible in the communication product, and not using color alone. It's another along those same lines. You're not using a single means to express that intended meaning.
Absolutely. And a great check, if you are not sure, I use the grayscale feature on my computer all the time when I'm reviewing things. I will just turn off all the colors and can I tell the difference between these different points on this graph? And then I'll provide that feedback. Descriptive file names. This is really important. A lot of the times the way files are named has nothing to do with kind of the purpose of that file. It is a filing system that graphic designer, that person is using. Maybe they haven't even changed default from something that's been imported in. But a lot of the times when I am reviewing content, if that file name is descriptive, I can usually figure out what the alternative text description of that image should be, so I can add it to the alternative text field. It also makes it easier to search for content. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Laine, being able to find file names?
The impact isn't so much about finding file names for me as it is when browsing with a screen reader. If a platform doesn't allow for adding alt text to an image, it defaults to the file name. So if I hear a string of letters and numbers, I have no clue what could potentially be in that image. It'll be the same for links. If a link is also an image within that communications product and there's no alt text or link text, then same thing, I get that file name. Where is AB 283 million going to take me? What's that mean? So those file names, it also becomes important as a content manager when I'm looking for a file to pull into a product. Again, what does that mean? What's that big long string of numbers mean to me? So for graphic designers, keep in mind your audience isn't just who's going to consume the product, it's also the other people who are working on that product and pulling it together.
Yeah, the search in our media library is text-based.
So if I'm not sure what a file name is, I can search, and if it's descriptive, I can find it with pretty good accuracy. So descriptive file names, that's a really easy one, but it's often overlooked. And then also making sure you're optimizing your image sizes and providing high quality images. So this is really important because if your image is too large, it's going to have downloading issues. It is going to take forever for that page to load. And that's where you may have broken images, or I'm not sure what's going on with this image. You want to really optimize that image size for where it's going to be. And if you're not sure, just look. If you're publishing on social media, there are all kinds of resources on preferred file or image size. Aim for the image that image is, or the size that the image is going to live. The other thing that you avoid is it being cropped in an incorrect way. We have certain images on our Boise State web theme. If you put in an image too large, it's going to kind of crop it however to fit in that image, and sometimes it's not going to look the way you want it to.
Facebook just did that to my logo.
Oh yes, we had all kinds of problems with the logo. And then high quality images. You want your images to not be pixelated, you want them to be clear. If you can't avoid adding text to your image at all, the more high quality that image is, the clearer that text is going to read. And then you can also provide a text description so that that's kind of a fallback if that image has issues. And then Laine, do you want to talk about this draft literal descriptions of your design? Because you had a really good point on that.
Yeah, so on comms teams, you may encounter a team member who experiences the world differently than the majority. I happen to be on one of those comms teams, and I tend to be the copywriter, and then I'm also the one who's proofing it for accessibility before we're publishing it on the web. And when a graphic designer hands over their image files, it's a huge help when they can literally describe what's in the image. And then that gives me the chance as the copywriter to make an informed decision about how I'm going to frame the copy around that picture so that we have that seamless experience in the product. So you never know. So having those literal descriptions can make a big difference. But if those products are going up into, especially a content management system, some of the file systems, like Carolyn said, they search by file name. In the CMS that I work in, we see the alt text, not the file name. So when they've uploaded a domestic violence awareness symbol, right? And they call it domestic violence awareness banner. That doesn't help me totally understand what's in it, because it turns out there were also people in that image, and calling out the diversity of the people in that banner was going to be important in the copy. But because that alt text was really generic and not descriptive from the designer, and when it was put into the library, I didn't have that context to work with. So you never know. It's not just about the reader, the consumer of that information as well. It's about your team members. Carolyn, are we ready to move on to?
We are on synchronized media now. So the more complex the process, the more planning you're going to want to do. Media, because there is so much that goes into it, there's imagery, there's audio, there's things that need to be, text descriptions that need to be synced up. There's a lot going on when you're talking about media that you really want to plan for those accessibility features from the beginning. If you plan ahead to provide captions and transcripts, it's going to help make that process go much smoother, because captioning and syncing up the audio and doing that can be very time consuming. But if you started with text, you're able to import that text, create a caption track, and then you now have a timed transcript, text transcript that you can provide with that media as well.
And really, who doesn't start their video with a script for the voiceover? there's not a lot of times where you jump in and just start shooting when you're talking about communications, intentional communications products.
Yeah, and the other thing you can do as you're planning that script is describe as you go, or use descriptive audio. So describing as you go is a great method. So instead of just popping on the screen, Carolyn Quintero, hi, my name is Carolyn Quintero. And so now I have a text, an audio description of my name on the screen that also is provided in the caption and available in the transcript. So with that one sentence, I've taken care of all that accessibility. If I don't introduce myself and just start talking, it takes a lot more to understand who's talking, who they are. You've got to add in audio description to explain the visuals coming on the page, and it becomes a much more labor-intensive process. So anytime you're recording someone, hey, make sure you introduce yourself before you start talking. Verbalize those speaker introductions. That's a fabulous way to go into it. If you are presenting, so here we have a slide. I'm just gonna let you guys read it. No, we're going to read it and describe it as we go. So plan for and provide captions and transcripts. Describe as you go or use your descriptive audio. Verbalize those speaker introductions. So those are ways that you can provide that audio description as you go. And then just kind of a thing to keep in mind, strobing, flashing content. You want to avoid that because it can trigger seizures, it can make people have headaches. You need to provide warnings if you can't avoid that kind of content, because you can cause injury for people if they're watching your content, aren't aware there's flashing, strobing content, and it triggers a seizure. You don't want to hurt anyone. So kind of related, you want to use those smooth and slow movements, not those rapid transitions and panning. And if you are using that type of movement, you can test it to make sure it's within a safe rate so that it doesn't cause those issues. Anything else for synchronized media, Laine?
That's a presentation into itself. I mean,
All of these really
are. We are covering these at a very high level, very, very high level. And it's likely to feel very overwhelming, and it's about to get more overwhelming.
Yes, because the text got a little cut off here, but kind of the most complex is if you are designing and developing digital products, you just need to know that this is where you need to spend most of your time, making sure every step of that design and development phase has accessibility built into it. Because if you don't, remediation is time consuming and costly, and you will miss your deadlines. So planning accessibility in early and often is a fantastic way to think about designing and developing digital products. Laine, do you want to go through the points on this?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, you're probably seeing now too, like the image designers, the image creators, the copywriters, the synchronized media, like all those pieces of content that come together in a larger product that is being designed and developed, probably seeing how much less work might need to be done now. Like if all of that we just talked about happens when we're publishing it to the website, it's just a huge stop. It becomes a complete roadblock a lot of times, especially when there is that urgency and need to ensure that accessible content and not take the risk of putting it out there and being like, yeah, we know it's not accessible, contact us if you need something, or we'll get to it when we get to it. That doesn't make people feel very valued. So definitely it takes the weight off of the shoulders a little bit as we get here, but even then, there's still a lot. As the designer and developer of a digital product, there's still, you're factoring all of those things together now, right? So at this point, you're ready to pick your font faces. You need to make sure that those are going to be easy to read, right? And in brand and online, on target with any images that have text in them already, and all the things there. back to that accessible color, right? That's not just applicable to images that are being generated, data visualizations that are being done. That is applicable to the entire product. So use accessible, contrasting colors, and don't use color alone to convey meaning. As a developer, you need to develop with keyboard access in mind. If you're using JavaScript, this becomes pretty intense. I'll tell you, HTML, like text is the great equalizer in the communications product. HTML is the great equalizer in the development space because it has all the semantic information that needs to be communicated to other machines that access it, screen readers. But you're building for keyboard access in addition to mouse interactions. So that is an extra layer of things to consider. How do you replicate drag and drop with a keyboard, right? Designing and developing for responsive design and not designing for a specific viewport. When you do that, you can restrict the flexibility of that content for users. So I already talked on that HTML, but if you've got synchronized multimedia within the product, you need to choose accessible plugins. So you need to make sure that media player can be accessed with a keyboard, or that if it has keyboard shortcuts, they still function within your environment. And test, and test some more. There's a lot of testing that goes in, whether that's manual testing. There are some automated tools that will catch up to about 60% of potential issues. They do a lot to flag something because a lot of the tests that you're going to do are not binary. It's not pass or fail. Exactly. There's a lot of subjectivity that can go into evaluating, is this link text meaningful? Is this alt text meaningful? So that meaningful piece, right? It's going to be subjective. So those automated test tools will only go so far when you're evaluating the communication product before publication.
All right, so that is a lot of information to take in and might be a little bit different than your current processes. If you're doing some of that stuff, keep doing it, and then just find ways to build some of those new processes into your workflow. And you will start seeing a business return on investment. One of the biggest return on investments is time and cost savings. If you are planning for accessible communication, you are going to reduce the time spent on remediation. So that means taking a final product and adding that accessibility into it. That is incredibly time consuming. I have a full-time job that does just that. Every single week we go in and we get a little better, but I have to review all that and make sure, hey, did they put alt text in their image descriptions? If not, I've got to reach out to them and spend all that time communicating and educating them on this, and then eventually they'll get there. It avoids those costly retrofits and redesigns later on. And reduce the need for costly alternative accommodations. Well, hey, it's okay if it's not accessible, we'll find a different way for you to use it. That other way may not be equitable, it may be very time consuming, it may be very costly to find all this other stuff. If you had just put that accessibility into the planning, it would have been ready to go and wouldn't have had to take all that time to provide those alternative accommodations.
We didn't grab this data point from our other
We
presentation
did
from a couple of years ago. There are a few data points out there about customers. Like if they can't access it, like 97% of them just walk away. They don't even bother to ask, is there an alternative?
Yeah, so if
they
you're
won't even give you the chance to include them. They'll just walk away.
Yeah, so where someone, in your business may reach out and say, hey, this is an accommodation for this inside tool that we're using to do work, that's one thing. But if it's an audience member or a customer that you're trying to pull in, if they can't access that information, you've lost the opportunity to convert them to a customer. So that's a huge cost saving or cost for the business.
And when you're doing that, you're also future-proofing your product. So as technology evolves, we have way more tools with artificial intelligence and some new softwares and new technology, but as that evolves, you'll be better positioned to upgrade with fewer accessibility issues and bugs. So that means less development time and more potential for innovation. And when you're increasing, another one is increased innovation. You can spend more time focusing on creating a better product by finding new ways to create the accessible experience for your customer. So a lot of the times I hear, well, we can't, accessibility, if we do that, it's just gonna slow us down and we're not gonna be able to do what we wanna do. I have never met someone when we've taken the time to create the accessible version that hate it. It usually solves a lot of the problems they've been having. Well, hey, this form isn't accessible, how do we fix it? Well, we don't need to fix it, it's fine. Well, yeah, we need to fix it, so we take the time, work through the issues, and then they're like, oh, that's way better for me, that works better for this solves a problem we didn't even know was accessibility related, and now we've got a form that they can use in future times that is more accessible. So a lot of the times, we just kind of try to find ways around barriers and we don't always know that they're accessibility related. So when we take a step back and think, well, how can we do this in a way that meets accessibility standards, that communicates in an accessible way? We kind of find ways to do it that are more innovative and more cost effective and more, it saves us time.
Who doesn't love the automatic motion detector door opener at the grocery store, right? That was an accidental innovation because people were trying to solve the access barrier. How do people in wheelchairs get in this building? That was an accidental innovation. And now look at what we have for motion detection. I mean, I just got a Ring notification. Apparently my husband finally got home. I mean, let's look at how far those things can go when you look at access and removing a barrier for somebody, where that innovation can lead.
Absolutely. So accessibility, if you get pushback at all, kind of lean into that innovation piece. That will kind of pull some people in because maybe they're going to find things that they didn't even know were issues. It's like, oh, well, this wasn't working because it was an accessibility issue. Let's get that fixed and now it's going to work for everyone. So that's a lot of what I spend my time working on at Boise State. And I have yet to find someone where they might be a little resistant at first. I have never met someone that says, oh yeah, I don't like that accessible document. It's not easier to read at all. I hate it. They love it. So with that, we have a few minutes, 5 minutes for questions before we provide some resources. But just before we open it up for some quick questions, it is totally okay if you're not sure questions to ask. That's totally normal. Just remember to take it slow and focus on one thing at a time as you go. So, anyone have questions? Yes.
Are you going to run the microphone, Carolyn?
I can.
How does multi-factor come across to screen readers and to other accessibility things? It'll pop up a dialog box, it'll ask you to do a text, it'll ask you to put in a UV key. How does that work?
Okay, so multi-factor authentication pieces, the whole I'm not a robot, those all vary drastically. But if you've got, your authentication so that you could send a text message. Okay, my phone talks to me, so send a text message. They can access that device. If it's, what are the letters in this image? And that's the only option, that CAPTCHA is not going to be useful. It's just an image. And if you put alt text in that image, the machines that you're trying to keep out have access. So you can't alt text CAPTCHAs, or you give the machines what they need to get in anyway. You might as well have left the door open. So there's a handful of different ways. There's several different plugins out there for doing it. I really encourage people to lean into the plugins that ask a question like, what's 2 + 2? Or give a multiple choice form that has to be submitted and validated. Because even if one of the most common CAPTCHA things that we see type out what you see in this image, the letters in this image, or get an audio challenge. Well, what if I have dual sensory loss? What if I'm deaf and blind? Now I can't see that picture. Now I can't hear this audio. I still can't get to you. I still can't get access. So those tend to be when we can do a question and answer form type, and I don't have names off the top of my head for all the plugins for all the different platforms. We could probably find a resource for that, but it just varies. The two-factor authentication, though, send a text message, use an authentication app. Those all work really well. I use Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator at least 3 times a day. So.
And always test if you're not sure. Okay, any other questions before we kind of go over our resources really quickly? Yes.
I was just wondering, I apologize if you covered it before. Is there I've never experienced a screen reader, and is there a particular application that you would recommend to?
So
So
you want to handle this?
yeah, as I said, so the question is about screen readers. I've never experienced one. Is there an application you'd recommend? Honestly, if you just pick up your phone, go into settings, go into accessibility. If you're on Google, you're going to find TalkBack. If you're on iOS, you're going to have VoiceOver. You can toggle that on and get some experience. It can be overwhelming. I don't always recommend doing it without support, or a really open mind and making sure that you're not super frustrated before you start. On Mac, you can press Command F5 and VoiceOver will turn on a Mac. On Windows, you can press Control Windows Enter and Narrator will come up. It's not the best Windows screen reader. It doesn't give as much information, but it can definitely get you started. It's important to understand there is a difference between screen readers and text-to-speech tools. In Edge, you've got the little read this page button. That's not a screen reader. That's text-to-speech that supports reading and comprehension, but it is not a screen reader. It's not going to speak as you tab through the page. It's not going to give you other information that a screen reader gives a blind user. And there are plenty of YouTube videos of screen reader demonstrations if you want to see a user using it. And I'm sure this afternoon in our workshop, we're going to have time so I can actually demo a screen reader a little bit too. So.
Yeah, and since we're at time, I am going to skip to the last. If you guys want to go to Amoureux AT Consulting, we're gonna put this in the course, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna make this one a separate course.
Okay.
So
we'll have all this information available that you can access all these resources in an accessible format. There are so many resources. If you ever are confused, just Google, resources for visual accessibility. You will find a million. But if you want to access the ones, all the information in this presentation, plus all of the resources that we have provided, learn.amoureuxatconsulting.com, and you can sign up for alerts. You can sign up for the information when we have the course posted, or when Laine has the course posted.
And yes, I know my domain is really long.
But it has amazing search engine optimization, and so you can just type in Laine Amoureux and you'll find her. All right, and with that, we're all wrapped up. Thank you so much.